Hi, welcome to Movie Digest. In this video I'm going to explain 2020 mystery movie, titled, Enola Holmes. Spoilers ahead. The movie starts with Enola Holmes introducing herself. Her mom insisted on naming her Enola, since she was a fan of word games, and her name spelled backwards alone. But she was never alone, as she spent most of her time with her mother Eudora in their home Ferndale Hall. Her father died when she was young and doesn't remember him. Her two older brothers left home, and didn't remember them either. Enola grew up learning from Eudora on how to read, study science, archery, and all sorts of exercise, both physical and mental. Her mom used to tell she can do anything at Ferndale. Enola also recalls walking in on Eudora in a secret meeting, that she tried to keep from Enola. On the morning of her 16th birthday, Enola awoke to find that her mother was missing, having left overnight. All she left behind for Enola with several gifts, including a book called The Language of Flowers. Enola goes to the train station to reunite with her older brothers, the legendary detective Sherlock Holmes, and eldest Mycroft Holmes, to figure out what happened to their mother. The brothers are surprised to see their little sister for the first time in ages. When they return to Ferndale Hall, they were disappointed on seeing its condition. Sherlock surveys the place to find clues over Eudora's disappearance, believing that she left on her own accord, and was not kidnapped. Enola gets worried as Sherlock thinks she will never return. They were shocked to find that Enola has not received a more traditional upbringing for young women, especially learning that Enola was homeschooled by their mother instead of getting a formal education. Mycroft decides to send Enola to a boarding school, so she won't be a complete failure in this world. So he brings in his old friend, Miss Harrison, who is strict and unkind. Sherlock thinks she just needs a governess, but Mycroft wants to break her and build her up. Miss Harrison tries to mold Enola into the image of a proper young woman, but Enola gets uncomfortable. She is eager to get Enola to her finishing school, and soon begins to treat her harshly. Enola argues with Mycroft over the decision, and asks him to test her on anything she needs to know. But he judges by the way she dressed. She then pleads Sherlock to not send her, but even Sherlock cannot do anything to prevent it, since she is Mycroft's responsibility. Soon Miss Harrison walks into the room, pretends to be friendly with her in front of her brothers. Mycroft thanks her for taking Enola, and informs he will bring Enola himself to her the next day. Enola retreats to the woods outside to sketch, where Sherlock goes to speak with her. He brings up a little pine cone that she kept as a pet and dragged around everywhere called Dash, named after the Queen's pet, but Enola barely remembers. She asks him why he was absent from home for so long or never wrote back, even saying that she kept clippings of all his cases. Sherlock says he leads a busy life, but he encourages Enola to look into this mystery herself. That night, Enola looks into the clues Eudora left her in her gifts, and finds a paper that begins with alone, meaning it's a message specifically for her. She tries to solve the puzzle, and finally gets her mom's message, Enola, look in my chrysanthemums. Enola goes to find Eudora's flower paintings and finds an envelope with money, and a message that says our future is up to us. She remembers Eudora telling her that she can take two paths, the one she makes for herself, or the ones others choose for her. Enola decides to take the case on herself and plans to sneak out of Ferndale Hall using the clothes Sherlock grew up in. Enola dressed as a boy, and uses necessary distraction. She goes to the different train station and chooses a different line altogether. Enola sees a woman who is looking for her son. She asks the officers to search the train thoroughly, but they deny her request, telling it is running extremely late. Enola boards the train, and it soon leaves the station. Meanwhile in Ferndale Hall, Mycroft calls for Enola and says it's time to go. But soon finds a ragdoll in her bed, and is caricature drawn by Enola. When she gets to her train car, Enola sees a young man emerging from a luggage bag overhead. He introduces himself as Viscount Tewkesbury, Marquis of Bayswater. He asks her to help hide him, but she knows someone is looking for him and orders him to leave. It turns out that was his own mother, plus his uncle and grandmother looking for him at the station. Tewkesbury ultimately leaves, but quickly returns as that man is checking every carriage. He asks for her help, but she decides to leave. Soon after, the man looking for him, an assassin named Lindhorn, spots him and pursues him. Although Enola tries to make her way out, she turns back around after realizing Tewkesbury is in real danger. Lindhorn attacks Tewkesbury and tries to throw him off the train, but Enola hits him with a crowbar and rescues the Marquis. They rush from there while he starts looking for them. The two then jump off the train to escape Lindhorn. Back at Ferndale Hall, Sherlock starts investigating on Enola's disappearance. The housekeeper informs they found her bicycle, but he is aware that was planted to send them in the wrong direction. She gets worried about Enola, as she knew nothing of the world. Enola and Tewkesbury wander for a while until it gets dark, and they stop to rest for the night. They discuss their dead fathers and why they ran away from home. Tewkesbury was set to take his seat in the House of Lords and would vote to move the country forward, but his family wants him to join the army and going overseas just like her uncle. So he chose to run away after a near-death experience. Enola decides that once they get to London, they will go their separate ways. Once in London, Enola bids Tewkesbury farewell. She realizes the outside world is not for her, as she finds herself in the chaos that she never experienced in the countryside. Meanwhile, Sherlock plans to locate Enola, and he reads about a disturbance on the train and figures his sister was involved. Enola soon changes her attire and buys herself some nice clothes. She then gets into a lodging house while pretending to be a proper Victorian lady. Enola continues her search for her mother by trying to leave ciphers in the newspapers she frequently reads so that she may also find her. Enola also remembers the address where her mother regularly sends letters. She reaches the place and comes across a jiu-jitsu class taught by a woman named Edith, who knew Eudora and recognizes Enola. She tells Edith what her plans are, but she tells Enola that Eudora has been hiding all her life. Enola recalls the meeting she walked in on, and Edith was there, and Eudora and other women were discussing someone named Ellie Houseman. However, Edith will not give her any useful information. Enola then finds a scroll that leads to more clues, which she uses while remembering other words discussed during the meeting. It turns out Ellie Houseman was just code for Limehouse Lane. Enola goes to Limehouse Lane in hopes of further locating her mother. She comes across a warehouse and uncovers what appear to be explosives and other plans, indicating Eudora fighting for women's rights, and is plotting some kind of revolutionary act. As Enola leads, she is found by Lindhorn, who attempts to drown her while trying to find Tewkesbury, but Enola fights back and escapes his clutches after setting off some explosives. She then resolves to hold off on finding Eudora and instead turns her attention to finding and protecting Tewkesbury, as she cannot help but feel some responsibility for his care. Enola disguises herself as a widow to avoid drawing attention to herself and arrives at Tewkesbury's estate to help his family find him. Although they try to send her away, she convinces them when saying she is working for Sherlock. It turns out that Inspector Lestrade is already on the case and doesn't believe Enola works with Sherlock as closely as he does. Lady Tewkesbury ends up sending both of them away. Enola talks to a gardener and learns Tewkesbury spends a lot of time in the woods. She then offers money to swap clothes with a gardener. Enola comes across Tewkesbury's treehouse near the area where a large branch had almost killed him. She goes through his belongings and sees that Tewkesbury was planning his escape for a while, as well as some flowers that Enola recognizes and takes as a sign. She is found by his grandmother, the Dowager, who recognizes the gardener's clothes on her, but Enola still convinces her she is the widow. As they walk, the Dowager tells her how she feels that England should stay as it is per the upcoming vote among the lords. Sherlock pays Edith a visit in his search for his mother and sister, and while he tries to convince her on the grounds that Mycroft would come after her assets, Edith calls Sherlock out on his obsession with his job and lack of attention given to his family, especially Enola. It also turns out that Mycroft had hired Lestrade to search for Enola, but going by Mycroft's description of scrappy young woman with no poise, Enola's disguise fooled Lestrade. Enola goes to a flower market and finds Tewkesbury. She takes him to hide after telling him he is still in danger, and it is learned that his father was murdered, while the branch that almost crushed him was cut deliberately. They are then found by Lestrade and run away after Enola brains him with a tea kettle. Unfortunately, Enola knows that they can't both get away, so she lets Tewkesbury go and is caught by Lestrade. Mycroft escorts her to Miss Harrison's school. Enola undergoes the rigorous routines that Miss Harrison forces all the other girls to go through, from the way they walk, to the way they eat, as well as wearing unbearable corsets. She is later visited by Sherlock, who commends her on her detective work, although he admits he is also there because he cares for her. He also brought Dash, which he found under their mother's bed. He tells it's always her choice, and the society can't control her, and their mother has proven it. It gives Enola the push to not give up on her mission. As she looks over some newspaper clippings, she observes the events surrounding the Lord's votes. She then receives a supposed package from Mycroft, but it is really Tewkesbury sneaking in, having remembered that Enola told him she was being sent there. They sneak out and steal Miss Harrison's car. The two head to Basilweather, as Enola has determined that Tewkesbury's uncle, Sir Wimbrel, must be the culprit, for he must have killed his brother and is trying to kill his nephew to succeed them and vote against their favors. They sneak into Tewkesbury's home at night to find it apparently empty, but Lindhorn appears and attacks them. He almost strangles Tewkesbury to death, but Enola gathers her strength and brings him down, causing him to smash his head against a statuette. The Dowager then emerges, revealing herself as the mastermind behind the assassination plot. She ordered her own son's murder and fires at Tewksbury so that they would not vote for the reform bill. Tewksbury survives, having been wearing a chest plate, and the dowager is exposed. Sherlock later goes to Lestrade to report on the dowager's guilt in the crime. Lestrade asks how he came to that conclusion, and after Sherlock reveals Tewksbury's uncle was in another country, fighting in the war during his father's death. Lestrade comments that Enola solved it first. Sherlock leaves chuckling to himself. Tewksbury accepts his new position in the House of Lords and gets ready to cast his vote. Enola sees him one last time to say goodbye. Later, she finds the day's paper and comes across a hidden message that was apparently from Eudora, telling her to meet at the Royal Academy, which Enola finds suspicious given that place's exclusion of women, so she believes Sherlock is behind this. It turns out to be true, as he and Mycroft are there waiting for her, and she never shows. Sherlock says he would like to take her as his ward. It is also noted that Tewksbury's vote helped lean in favor of the reform bill. Before the two leave, Sherlock finds that Enola left Dash on a nearby statue for him. He walks past her as she is in disguise, and he seemingly knows it's her, leaving Dash there with her. Enola goes to her lodging house and finds Eudora there in her room. Although she is only going to be there briefly, she tells Enola she is sorry for leaving abruptly, but she explains that she had to leave to keep Enola safe so that she would not have to get involved in her personal activities. Eudora also tells her daughter how proud she is of how she turned out. They embrace before parting ways again. Enola speaks to the audience one last time, saying that, just like her mother and brothers, she is going to chart her own path as a detective and finder of lost souls, and thinks the future is up to us. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this.